There is a man in the Bible who arrives with no introduction at all, no father named, no tribe explained, no call from God anywhere on the page. Every other prophet gets one. Moses has a burning bush. Isaiah has a throne room full of smoke. Jeremiah is told he was known before he was born. This man gets nothing. One verse, and he is already standing in front of the most dangerous king in Israel, talking. And the first thing out of his mouth is a threat about the weather. He says the sky is going to close, no dew, no rain, not for years. Then he adds 4 words that explain everything he does afterward. Except by my word. Then he vanishes. For 3 years nobody can find him, and a king tears his own kingdom apart looking. His name is Elijah, and you probably know how his story ends. Chariots of fire, horses of fire, a whirlwind, and a man who never dies. That is the version everybody carries around. The hero of faith, unshakable. Standing alone on a mountain, calling fire out of a clear sky. Here is what that version quietly leaves out. The greatest day of his life ends with fire falling and a nation face down in the dirt. Roughly 24 hours later, he is under a desert bush asking God to kill him. Not years later, not after a slow decline, the next day. So here is the one thing this video is going to show you. Elijah is not a story about a man who is strong. It is a story about what God does with a man immediately after he breaks. And what he does is not what you would expect. But to see it, you have to start where the text starts, which is nowhere at all. 1 Kings, chapter 17, verse 1. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, that is the whole introduction. A nickname and a village so obscure that scholars still argue about where it actually was. Rough country out past the Jordan. Ahab is king of the northern kingdom, and the writer of Kings does not hide his opinion. He says Ahab did more evil than every king before him, not because Ahab was cruel, because of who he married. Her name is Jezebel, a princess of Sidon up the coast, and she does not leave her gods at home. She brings Baal into Israel, not as an option, as the state religion, prophets on the royal payroll, altars of the Lord coming down. And here is the detail that makes the whole story click. Baal is not a generic idol. Baal is the storm god. He rides the clouds. He is the reason, they said, that the rain comes and the barley grows and your children eat. That is his entire job description. So here Elijah again, standing in that throne room, in the shadow of a God who exists to make it rain. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. He is not announcing a drought. He has walked into Baal's house and turned off Baal's water. It is the most precise insult in the Old Testament. And notice the phrase he uses about himself, before whom I stand. That is court language. It is what a servant says about the king he attends. Elijah is standing in Ahab's palace telling Ahab he works somewhere else. Then the sky shuts. And God's next word to Elijah is not congratulations. It is run, hide by the brook Chariot. I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. Ravens are unclean birds. The law of Moses lists them by name. They are scavengers. A priest would not touch one, and these are the caterers. Bread and meat in the morning, bread and meat in the evening, and the man eats it. So Elijah sits by the water, and the water goes down. The prophet who called the drought is not exempt from the drought. He watches his own miracle dry up, 1 inch at a time, until the brook is a line of cracked stones. And only then does God speak. Arise, go to Zarephath. I have commanded a widow there to feed you. Zarephath is in Sidon. Sidon is Jezebel's country. God's plan to hide his prophet from the queen is to move him into the queen's homeland. So Elijah walks into the storm god's backyard, in a famine the storm god cannot fix, and knocks on the door of the poorest person in town. And he does not find her cooking. He finds her gathering sticks at the gate. 2 sticks. The text says it that way. That is not a woman preparing a meal. That is a woman building one small fire because she knows exactly how much fuel one last loaf needs. He asks for water. She turns to get it. And he adds, almost casually, "And bring me a morsel of bread." And she stops. "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug." And then she tells him what the sticks are for. "That I may prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die, that we may eat it and die." She has already done the arithmetic. She is not hoping. She is finishing. And here Elijah says something that sounds, on first reading, almost monstrous. "Make me a little cake of it first, and afterward make something for yourself and your son." First, he asks a starving woman for the first portion of the last food her child will ever eat. And then he tells her why. "The jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty, until the day the Lord sends rain, not filled, not multiplied, no storehouse appearing overnight, not spent, not empty. The promise is smaller than you want it to be, because there is no overflow." Every morning she walks to that jar, and there is a handful in it, never 2. And every morning she has to decide, again, whether to use it. A pagan widow in Baal's country trusts the God of Israel further than Israel is trusting him at that exact moment. Then the story turns hard. The boy gets sick, and his illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. The son survives the famine. The son survives the last meal, and then he dies anyway in a house where the flour never runs out. And she turns on Elijah. "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." That is not theology. That is a mother in a doorway with her dead child in her arms. And Elijah does not defend himself. He says 3 words. "Give me your son." He carries the boy up to the roof chamber where he sleeps, lays him on his own bed, and prays. And listen to how he prays. "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn, by killing her son?" That is an accusation. The prophet is not soothing anybody. He is asking God out loud what exactly he thinks he is doing. Then he stretches himself out on the child 3 times and cries, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." And it does. This is the first resurrection recorded anywhere in the Bible. Not for a king. For a foreign widow's boy in a rented upstairs room. He carries him down and says, "See, your son lives." And she answers with the line the whole chapter has been building toward. "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. Now I know, not when the flour held, not when the oil held. She needed the worst thing to happen first." Then the text jumps. "After many days the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year." 3 years compressed into half a sentence. Because the book is not interested in the weather. It is interested in what the weather is proving. And by year 3, it has proved everything. Baal rides the clouds. There are no clouds. His prophets have shouted at an empty sky for 3 years, and it has not rained once. Out in Samaria, Ahab is doing something almost pitiful. The king of Israel and his palace manager are personally walking the country looking for grass to keep the horses alive. The manager's name is Obadiah. And the text drops 1 sentence about him that quietly wrecks a line Elijah is about to say twice. When Jezebel was cutting off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water. 100 prophets. Alive, fed, hidden by a man walking around inside the palace. Hold on to that number. It is going to matter enormously. So Obadiah is out looking for grass, and Elijah steps into the road in front of him. And Obadiah falls on his face and then panics. But he swears he will show himself. And so, after 3 years, the king and the prophet stand in the same road. And Ahab opens with 4 words. Is it you, you troubler of Israel? The Hebrew is stronger than it sounds. It is the word for a man who brings ruin on his own people. You are the reason everything is falling apart. And Elijah does not blink. I have not troubled Israel, but you have, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Then he names the terms. Gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal. And there is a second number in that sentence people forget, and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. And here is the thing worth stopping on. Ahab does it. So they come to Carmel, a ridge in the north, green in any normal year, brown now, running down toward the sea. And Elijah stands in front of all of them and asks one question. How long will you go limping between 2 different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. The word behind limping is a picture. A man hopping between 2 branches, never committing his weight to either one. That is the actual sin here. Not that Israel rejected God, that Israel kept him and Baal and hedged. He never have to choose if he never stepped down. And the people did not answer him a word. Silence. A whole nation caught in exactly that position and unwilling to say so out loud. So he sets the test. 2 bulls, 2 altars, no fire. You call on your God, I will call on mine. The God who answers by fire, he is God. So they take it. And from morning until noon they call, O Baal, answer us. And there was no voice. And no one answered. And they limped around the altar they had made. And at noon, Elijah starts heckling them. And the Bible records the heckling word for word. Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. And it works. They lose control. They cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. They rave until the time of the evening offering. And the text says it flatly. There was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah says, Come near to me. And before he touches his own altar, he repairs the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. 12 stones. According to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, and that is a political statement as much as a religious one. Then he digs a trench around it, lays the wood, cuts the bull, and gives an order that sounds insane in year 3 of a drought. Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it a second time. Do it a third time. 12 jars of water in a famine poured into the dirt. The water ran around the altar and filled the trench. O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. And then the line that tells you what the whole day was for. Answer me, that this people may know that you are God, and that you have turned their hearts back, not so that Elijah wins, so that they come home. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God, twice. And there is something hidden in that sentence. In Hebrew, it is YHWH, Huha, Ah, Elohim. Say it aloud, and you are saying the prophet's own name back at him, Eliyahu. My God is YHWH. He has been walking around as a sentence, and the nation just finished it. And then the part of this chapter nobody paints. The prophets of Baal are seized at the brook Kishon and executed. All 450. The text reports it in one verse and moves straight on to the weather. Because Elijah turns to Ahab and says something strange, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain." There is no rain. There is no cloud. The sky is the same hard blue it has been for 3 years. He says he can hear it. And then he climbs to the top of the mountain and bows down on the earth and puts his face between his knees. That is not a victory pose. He has just won the most public argument in Israel's history, and now he is folded up in the dirt, alone. He tells his servant, "Go up, look toward the sea." And the servant goes and looks and comes back and says, "There is nothing." And Elijah says, "Go again." 7 times. And at the 7th time, the servant says, "Behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea." And Elijah does not wait for more. "Prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you." And in a little while the heavens grew black, and there was a great rain. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Understand what that is. Ahab is in a chariot. Elijah is on foot. And Elijah gets there first in a downpour across roughly 17 miles of mud. He is not running from the king. He is running in front of him like a royal escort. He is honoring Ahab. He thinks the war is over. Ahab walks into the palace and tells Jezebel everything, and she does not repent. She does not even ask a question. She sends a messenger. "So may the gods do to me, and more, also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." 24 hours. That is the whole message. And notice what she does not do. She does not send soldiers. She sends words. And it works instantly. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life. And this is the hinge of the whole story. He does not fail because he was weak. He fails on the far side of the greatest success of his life. He runs south, out of Israel, through Judah to Beersheba, the last town before the desert starts, and he sits down under a broom tree. A desert shrub with thin gray leaves, barely shade at all, and asks that he might die. It is enough. "Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Listen to the logic. He measured himself against every prophet before him, expected to be the one who finally fixed it, and the nation went back to Baal in a day. The fire fell and nothing changed. That is what is killing him, not Jezebel. The uselessness of the miracle. And then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. Now watch what God does. Because it is not a rebuke, it is not a lecture, and it is not a vision. An angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." And there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. He does not say thank you. He does not pray. He eats and goes back to sleep. And the angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." Read that. The journey is too great for you. God's first response to a suicidal prophet is a nap, a meal, and an acknowledgement that it is too much. And in the strength of that food, he went 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. He goes into a cave and spends the night. And the word of the Lord comes to him with a question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And out comes the speech he has clearly been rehearsing the whole walk. "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. I only am left." And that is not true. Obadiah has 100 prophets in 2 caves. Elijah met Obadiah on the road. Obadiah told him about them to his face 1 chapter ago. That is what despair does. It is not a lie you tell. It is a fact you can no longer reach. And God does not argue with him. He says, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. Fire. Of all of them, fire. Days ago, fire was how God answered. Fire was the proof. Fire was the whole point on Carmel. And after the fire, in the King James, a still small voice. That translation is beautiful, and it is not quite what the Hebrew says. The phrase is kol damama daka. Kol is a sound or a voice. Daka means thin, fine, crushed, small. And damama does not mean small, it means silence. Stillness. Stillness. So the most literal reading is not a small voice. It is a sound of thin silence, a voice made of quiet. Whatever it was, Elijah knows it instantly. He wraps his face in his cloak. He did not do that for the wind. He did not do that for the fire. And the voice asks the exact same question as before. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he gives the exact same answer, word for word. The speech has not changed at all. He is still alone. He is still the only one. So God does not fix his feelings. God gives him work. "Go, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. Anoint Jehu to be king over Israel. And anoint Elisha to be prophet in your place." Hear that last one. In your place. Part of the cure for this man is being told, gently, that he is not the last line of defense and that he can put it down. And then the sentence that answers what he actually said. "Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal." 7,000. He said 1. He was off by a factor of 7,000 and he had no idea. So Elijah goes and finds Elisha. And Elisha is plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he is with the 12th. And Elijah does not preach. He does not explain. He walks past him and throws his cloak over him and keeps walking. That is the whole call. And Elisha runs after him and says, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you." And Elijah says, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" He takes the oxen and sacrifices them, and boils their flesh using the wooden plow as fuel, and gives the meat to the people, and they eat. And now the story jumps forward to a small piece of ground and a man who says no to a king. Naboth has a vineyard in Jezreel, right next to the palace, and Ahab wants it. And he asks honestly and offers a fair price, or a better vineyard. Naboth says no. And his reason is not stubbornness. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." He goes home vexed and sullen and lies down and turns his face to the wall and will not eat. The king of Israel is sulking over a garden. And Jezebel comes in and says the line that defines her. "Do you now govern Israel? Arise and eat, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth." And she does it by the book. That is the horror of it. She writes letters in Ahab's name, seals them with his seal, and sends them to the elders of Naboth's own city. Proclaim a fast. Seat Naboth at the head of the people. Set 2 worthless men opposite him to accuse him of cursing God and the king. Then take him out and stone him. And his own neighbors do it. And Ahab goes down to take possession of the vineyard and asks no questions. Not one. And there, standing between the vines, is a man Ahab has not seen in years. And Ahab says, "Have you found me, O my enemy?" And Elijah gives him one question that lands like a hammer. "Have you killed and also taken possession?" And then the sentence, "In the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick your own blood. And of Jezebel, the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel." And then something nobody expects. Ahab tears his clothes and puts sackcloth on his flesh and fasts and goes about dejectedly. And God says to Elijah, "Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring the disaster in his days." And Elijah has to stand there and hear it. The man who wanted fire watches mercy go to the one person he would never have given it to. And then the end. Except that it is not a death. 2 Kings chapter 2. Elijah and Elisha walk a route that reads like Israel's history in reverse. Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, and then the Jordan. And at every stop, the sons of the prophets come out and say the same thing. Do you know that today the Lord will take away your master from over you? And here's the quiet detail. Sons of the prophets, groups of them, at Bethel, at Jericho, 50 of them standing at the Jordan, watching. At the Jordan he rolls up his cloak and strikes the water, and it parts, and the two of them cross on dry ground. That is Moses at the sea. That is Joshua at this exact river. He is leaving Israel the way Israel came in, walking backwards through the door. And on the far side, Elijah asks him, "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha says, "Please let there be a double portion of your spirit on me." And this is one of the most misread verses in the Bible. It sounds like twice the power. Elisha asking to be the bigger prophet. It is not. A double portion is a legal term. In the law of Moses, it is what the firstborn son inherits. 2 shares where every other son gets 1. Elisha is not asking to be twice Elijah. He is asking to be his son. He is asking for the inheritance and for the right to carry his father's name. And Elijah says, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it shall be so. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so." And as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Not in the chariot. The chariot never carries him. The chariot comes between the two men, and the whirlwind is what takes him up. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. My father." That is the word. That is what the double portion was about, and it is the first thing out of his mouth. And then he saw him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes and tore them in 2 pieces. And the cloak, the one thrown over him in a field years earlier, falls. And he picks it up and goes back and strikes the water, and it parts. So look back at all of it. The man who arrived out of nowhere leaves the same way. No genealogy at the start, no grave at the end. And that unfinished quality is why he never goes away. Because the last page of the Old Testament, in Malachi, comes back to him by name. "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." Which is why, when John the Baptist appears in the desert in camel hair and a leather belt, the priests come out and ask him one question: "Are you Elijah?" And why, to this day, at Passover, in millions of homes, a cup is poured that nobody drinks, and a door is opened for a guest who has not come yet. But here is the piece I want to leave you with, and it is not the fire. Because James, in the New Testament, says one strange thing about him. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and that is the whole story. The prophet whose name means "my God" is YHWH, is the same man who sat under a bush and asked to die. And God's answer to that man was not fire. It was bread. It was sleep. It was a hand on his shoulder and the words, "The journey is too great for you." It was a sound of thin silence on a mountain, and a number he did not know, and a young man in a field to carry it after him. Elijah won on Carmel and broke the next day. Both are in the book. God kept him anyway. That is not a footnote to the story. That is the story.